Fear can paralyze you, squeeze the breath inside you, chop you in despair. Overwhelmed by sorrow, burdened by tomorrow, isolation's here. Doubt can lose, accuse and leave you drifting at the mercy of the waves. No compass, no lifeline, no sight of distant shoreline, nothing of the certainty you crave. Stay with me. Pray with me. Breathe. When ocean mists surround you, storms and gales astound you, I will take control. I know the raging oceans, they'll calm when I have spoken, and I will steer you safely home. Remember always, I am with you. See the wounded healer's hands. Freedom, hope, forgiveness follow. See how resurrection comes. Stay with me. Pray with me. Believe. Peace be upon you, peace in times of danger, peace within your heart. Peace upon your children, peace for friend and stranger, this peace I now impart. Remember always, I am with you. See my wounded healer's hand. Freedom, hope, forgiveness follow. See now resurrection comes. See now resurrection comes. Stay with me. Pray with me. Breathe. Stay with me. Pray with me. Believe.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was totally engrossed in this book. Well, here we are, gathered from all around the world to celebrate the publication of Fierce Love. I was thrilled and honoured when Adrian asked if I'd join him from my lockdown retreat here on the North Devon coast to say a few words today. I remember very well the first time I encountered Adrian. I was at a party in London in 1982. Music was playing in the background, which really caught my attention. In fact, I enjoyed the music far more than the party. So afterwards, I asked if I could borrow the tape, which I then copied and played over and over and over again. It was The Passion with Adrian Snell and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I rapidly became a fan, and I even replaced my bootleg copy with the real thing. Then a couple of years later, I was going through a tough time, and one of the things that helped me through it was listening to Adrian's music. There's something about it that can touch you at a very deep level, whether you're partying or feeling down. That's something I discovered long before I got to know the man himself. And I know for a fact that I'm not alone in having this experience. Where does this remarkable gift come from? Well, this book gives an insight. Perhaps Adrian's reached the age and a stage in life when he can say things he might not have done in the past. And it's his honesty that makes this book so fascinating. If you're a fan, you'll get an insight into what lies behind music that you know and love. If you're new to Adrian's music and read this book, you'll surely want to raid his back catalogue. And if you want to read about navigating the perilous world of rock music when you have a deep faith and a strong sense of values, well, this is the book for you. So wherever you are, I invite you now to raise a glass or a mug of tea or coffee to congratulate Adrian, Leon, and Natalie and Richard at Sacristy Books. Together, they've turned a vague idea of a book about Adrian and the healing quality of music into something really special. So cheers. Here's to fierce love. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll get back to my book.
Thank you, Newell, for that lovely introduction. And welcome all of you around the world watching. My name is Leon van Steensel. I authored the book with Adrian. This is my office. Welcome in this home. And obviously, we're an international stream tonight, viewers from around the world. But especially, I would like to welcome from his home in Bath, Adrian Snell. Adrian.
So much, Leon.
Hello.
Nice to see everybody. And yeah, a special thanks to those in Australia who I know are watching, who must have had to get up very early. And there's a few people in the USA who probably had to stay up very late. I've got that the right way around. I think so. But just amazing. Yeah, what a lovely way to connect.
Whenever they are. Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely. Now, I must say thank you also to the team at Sacristy Press for making this stream possible. Richard Hilton, Natalie Watson, who have worked so diligently over the past few months to get the book ready for release, and also this stream. So thanks to them as well.
Thanks indeed. Oh, and Leon, don't forget, because of COVID regulations, let's just get this sorted.
Yes.
Okay.
You're way ahead of me.
Yeah.
I'm sure we are 6 feet apart. But apart from that, how are you doing overall, Adrian?
I'm doing fine. I have to say, looking at after Ed Newell's introduction, I never saw the North Devon coast looking like that. If that really is what it looks like, that's where I'm going after this. I can promise you. I'm doing fine. It's a very strange time, as it is for all of us. And the music therapy work I'm doing now is almost entirely at a distance via Zoom. So that is a very strange experience, given that, therapy, whatever kind of therapy it is very much about contact with people one way or another. So had to be a major adjustment. But other than that, things are looking good. Thank you.
Yes. So it's obviously also a first to launch a book in this manner. There have been books of you before that were centered around certain projects. This is the first that actually tells the complete as we can say with the asterisks attached to it, story of Adrian Snell and the meaning and healing of your music. Now, let me introduce a little bit of what we're going to do in this stream tonight. Obviously, we're going to talk about the book, its genesis, the process, the contents. There will be time for Q&A because we know several people have sent in questions, and obviously if you really want to ask a question tonight, you can do so during the live broadcast. Just make sure you comment on the video wherever you are looking, and it'll pop up with us and we can actually answer that question then. So if you want to ask questions during the broadcast, you can do so. And yes, so let's start at the very beginning, because obviously the question that often pops up is why? Why a book and why Fierce Love? Perhaps we can actually start at the very beginning, and you can tell it from your perspective, Adrian.
Well, the why, Leon, has a lot to do with you, actually, because although you're right, there have been other books before. They have been primarily about specific works. So there's a book that particularly traced the story of my album Alpha and Omega and Song of an Exile and the thinking that went behind that and my own life experience. Same sort of thing with City of Peace. But it was you nearly 4 years ago who approached me with the idea of writing my story. And if I remember rightly, and you can correct me if I got this wrong, I really wasn't convinced that people would be interested enough in reading an entire book that traced my story. And all credit to you, and you didn't know I was going to say this, but you put that kind of nice kind of pressure on me to take it seriously. And then we embarked on a series of meetings, interviews, all sorts of stuff that took place over, nearly 4 years, obviously not solidly. But I think what convinced me, why I came around to this, I suppose, is because knowing the kind of comments, kind of shared experiences I've had from people all over the world to my work over many, many years, there is a sense in which you can't separate the artist, the composer, from what he's made. And increasingly, I realized that people actually did want to know why did that music come in the way that it did? Why did I decide to focus an album theme on that particular thing? So I think I came to realize that there was value in telling my story, the good bits, the bad bits, and everything in between.
Yes. So perhaps there are some people wondering why you would actually go with a Dutch journalist to tell that story, because it's obviously probably a bit unconventional in that regard. But perhaps
the giveaway is your name, by the way.
It is. Yeah.
That's not going to be English. I mean, to answer that question directly, two things really. The general answer is that if there's one country in the world that has been more faithful to me, more loyal than any other, it is actually the Netherlands. I'm incredibly fortunate to have had that ever since I think my first concert visit there was in 76 or something, 1976. And partly due to some excellent television exposure that I had early in my work in Holland, and then just the Dutch people taking my work to their heart. That country has given me so much. It gave me two managers for a start. But language, as we all know, is a massive, can be a massive benefit and a massive problem. If language isn't complete, or if we misunderstand words and words mean different things in different cultures, that can be a real problem. But again, and I know you didn't know I was going to say this, in you, I found, I think, probably the single most fluent English writer, especially as a Dutchman, in you. And I've just been completely amazed by your gift to understand the nuances of the English language. Now, obviously, we worked together to correct things and to put things as I would want to say them. But the starting point was so strong with having somebody like yourself who really has a command of English in every sense of the word.
Well, not quite sure what to say other than thank you.
Don't have to say anything. No, it's genuine. That's. Yeah. You asked the question why go with a Dutch journalist? Well, it's actually because it was you, and the other reason I might say was because I did interviews with you long before you had this idea of the book, and I remember so well that it was those interviews that really caught my imagination. You know, when you're a traveling artist, anybody listening to this who is in the arts in any field and has to do interviews, you'll know how incredibly stale they can be how boring actually, and I avoid them like the plague sometimes. But what you're looking for is the journalist who will ask searching questions that cause you to think and challenge your own thinking. And that's what you did the first time I met you. So I kind of knew from the start that in working alongside you, it wasn't just going to be obvious answers and obvious questions.
Well, thank you again. That's very kind. It's you mentioned the process of the editing of the book and all that. I think this is the right time to actually thank a few people that were involved in doing so, especially Judy Bloomfield, who went over the manuscript, and as much
many
as
times.
yes, many times,
Yeah.
and as much as my command of English is lauded, I could not have done this without her, because her editing skills and eye for British grammar has made this what it is.
Yeah,
so
thank you, Judy.
Thanks to Judy, who in league with Natalie Watson made this so work, and obviously, of course, also your wife Sue, who not only has been there to look at the what was written, but also was, I actually call her the conscience of the book, because she, in a way,
she'll like that.
yeah, because she, in a way, kept it honest and kept it focused on what it should be. So thank you, Sue, for being involved with that.
She's upstairs, and oh, by the way, darling, don't forget to put the Thai curry on in about half an hour. Thank you. Okay.
So once we got started with the book a couple of years ago, there was obviously not yet a full title, but you did have a few. Right off the bat, you had an idea for the title "Fierce Love." Can you explain why that title, and what drove you to choose that for the overall story that you wanted to tell?
So the full title, as you know, is "Fierce Love: Music Leads a Lost Child Home." Fierce Love is also the title of my last solo album, 2013, I think it is. The simplest way of explaining that title is I had an interview with the father of a son who'd been bullied in the playground. I can't even remember the context. Just one of those, hundreds of minutes of radio one listens to, and all of a sudden there was something about this interview with his father that made me prick up my ears. And he just described how, as he sat at a distance and saw his young child being bullied, physically as well as emotionally, he could not describe the emotions that came to him, that utter sense of protectiveness, that fierce love. He just rushed to the scene. It was all he could do to stop himself being very physically violent with the person that was doing the bullying, but he managed to do that because it was only a kid. But he used those words, fierce love. And I started thinking about, first of all, my own experience as a father, and my goodness, does that resonate with me. I have 3 children and now 4 grandchildren. And it's very hard to explain. Other parents and grandparents will know exactly what I'm talking about. But the protectiveness you feel towards your little ones is, you cannot express that in words. It's very, very deep. So I took that on board as a father, and then I began to think about my relationship with God and his love. And I have to say that the more I began to focus on that, the more I found that word very applicable to God's love for his people, for his world, for his children as well. A fierce love. It's like that there is a phrase of one of many given to Jesus in the Bible where he's called the Lion of Judah. And I love that picture of the lion. What a great image, the Messiah as a lion. And we know that lions can be fierce. So I think that part of the title, the fierce love, came from that sense of this is a love like no other. And there are many ways of describing love. Fierce, that protective side of love, is perhaps not so often spoken about. And the music leads a lost child home is simply a statement of the truth for me. And I think for many people, that somehow many of us know the experience of having pieces of music, having an experience of a concert or a moment when we heard something, and we felt we were coming home. And I have been so fortunate to have music as a bedrock of my life ever since I was born, and it's always led me home.
There is actually a question from a Dutch girl named Ellen Witter, and she asked that she was surprised to read already in the book which she ordered that you were struggling as a child, from a child onwards, in life in a certain way. Not to give it away, of course, for those who have not yet read the book, but she does ask if your faith or music have helped you come to terms with that.
Well, looking back, absolutely yes. Of course, at the time, you're not really you're not analyzing all of that. All I know is that ever since I have memories of any sort, aspects of faith and aspects of music have come together. So as I grew into an understanding of my faith, I was, from a very early age, writing music that was an expression of that, as well as other stuff. So there is a sense in which, my writing, my music, has been just an extension of me and the way I've dealt with life. One way I could perhaps answer her question is, what would have happened without music for me? Now, obviously, if I'd been born without musical interest or gifts, there would have been something else. But given who I am, and given the centrality of music to me for as long as I have lived, I just cannot imagine where I'd be without it, because it has sustained me. It has brought me home. It's given me a place to go to express things that I couldn't possibly put into words. It's taken me to very dark places and places of great joy, everything in between. So yeah, so I'm sure it helped in that there was no choice. It had to be music. That would be where I'd always go to put things, put emotions into a language that wasn't words.
Yeah. Now, in the book, you actually go into great depth as to the role music played in your early formative years, and of course, what came out of that was some of your very early music, which evolved into a project like The Passion. One of those songs is Golgotha, and you have played that probably more than any other song in your career. It's been played in so many different types of settings. We actually have a clip of Golgotha played in the Netherlands at Flevo Festival. I suggest we take a look at that and then continue the conversation.
Great. I haven't aged at all, have I?
It is, yes. So for those a bit, well, obviously many people will be familiar on this stream with your music, but for those who are not, this might be actually a bit of an eye opener with regards to the song that started this stream off, which was a new song called "Breathe, Believe." It's good to note that for those who have been following you throughout the years, there has been a period where you seem to be away from the limelight, but in your case, you actually continued your journey in a different way. What happened in those years? Can you briefly tell that, and then tell
Sure.
how that reconnects to the story that you're telling in Fierce Love?
Okay, so I will try to be brief, but it was at the turn of the century, sort of 1999, around that time. If I'm really honest, I'd come to a place where I just didn't know how to carry on. And by that, I think I mean coming to that point of thinking, I've been doing what I do for, between 35, 40 years. Is that it? Is that what I continue to do till I can't do it anymore? Namely, touring, recording, making sure that you meet the timescales, because a career in music involves working hard and making sure you sustain the audience that you have. And I came to this point of just feeling that there'd been a lot of sacrifices those around me, particularly my family, had to make with my choice of career, but that also there was something in me that was lost. I didn't know where to go with it all. And it was then that in my sort of searching time, I remembered another Dutch person. I remembered a lecture I had heard many years before in Holland with a Dutch music therapist at a time when I didn't even know there was a profession with that title. And she had spoken about music therapy, and it had made such an impression on me that I kind of logged it. And here I was, sort of 15 years later, thinking, what next? And I suddenly remember that conversation, and I managed to find her. I spoke to her, and she reignited my thought that perhaps this was the way forward. And sure enough, to cut a story short, she gave me contacts in England. I made those connections, and within a year, I'd started to train as a music therapist. So it was a 2-year course. Once I qualified, I started to practice, and somehow that was what brought me back to music, but in a completely new way, in a completely different context. That, as you hinted at with Fierce Love, that would eventually feed all the way back to my compositions and my songwriting, because you cannot avoid, as a music therapist, rethinking everything you thought you knew about sound and music.
Excellent. So, as a music therapist now, you are a practicing music therapist, and you are writing again, or you have been writing quite a lot actually over the past year or so. We have already heard the song "Breathe, Believe" at the start of the stream. It might be good to mention that you actually do have new music on the way, isn't it? Do you?
I really do, and it wasn't due to be any sort of a marketing event. All I would say is I have a great deal of material, to the point where I'm actually seriously thinking that there will be an album sequence, probably 3 albums, starting with one release next year. And I know, singer-songwriters, composers tend to say this about their own material, that I feel very proud of it. I feel very strongly that I've got some good stuff there, but I really do. I feel that there's something about what I'm writing now that has benefited from everything that's gone before, including my work as a music therapist. Also, we are so blessed with the technology that exists now, which means we can experiment, explore sounds from all over the world, literally in our little rooms. But I have a lot of material. A lot of it is not only written, but actually already recorded and at the mixing, mastering stage, and some that is in process. And Breathe, Believe is indeed one of them. But there will be a new album for sure next year, and then probably 2 more to follow from the same kind of themes.
Yeah. Now you mentioned sounds and the way you embrace technology. We actually have a question from Mark Longsworth, who says, in the 70s, when you began your career, analog tape was pretty much the norm, and it was eventually replaced to digital, where everything now is digital.
No.
Many artists don't live long enough to have a career that sees those kinds of changes embraced in their music. You have. How did you embrace it? Did you even embrace it, or were you resistant to it?
Well, I had to embrace it. That's the first thing, of course, because we're not recording on 24-track tape anymore. In fact, the first thing I'm going to do, okay, for our viewers, is to show them something. Anybody, let's say, under the age of probably about 30 may never have ever seen anything like this. Right, so this is a 24-track reel of tape. And the amazing thing is that this is genuinely one of the tapes used to record the original Passion. So the original Passion is on this. Now you see the size of it. And it's very heavy. And that's probably a third of the album. Then I want to show you this. He said, having just dropped it on the floor, I think. Well, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you what it is. An SD card. So you know what an SD card is. It's that size. And I was going to show you an SD card upon which are at least 2 albums worth of what I'm working on at the moment. It's not totally complete, and there will be other stages, but all of the recording bits, all of the instruments, all of the vocals is on that. So the first thing to say in answer to the question is that in terms of practicalities and what now becomes possible, of course, the digital revolution has been extraordinary, and it's made things possible that were never possible before, including be able to work from home and work, a lot more cheaply actually too, but also getting access to sounds that, are digitally reproduced, but they're very authentic sounds, and they could be of almost any sound, any instrument, anywhere in the world. So on that level, I have benefited hugely. But there is another argument, and some of the more music-concerned listeners might know this, that the digital format loses something in the process to analog. There are some artists who kind of swear by analog and say, we've lost something massive by not using tape like this. Neil Young, I think, is what comes to mind, who still only records on 24-track tape. There are other artists, the old stages, who will say, no, we will only ever record on tape, because it's very hard to kind of explain really, but obviously the reproduction of the sound is so different. So on one, you're laying sound down on physical tape, and the other is numbers, and digital numbers. So I accept the argument that there is a difference in the sound, and it could be argued that there is a kind of a brightness, a crystal clarity to the digital that loses something of the warmth that analog gave you. But I personally, I'm very grateful for digital because of what it's enabled me to do.
Yeah. One of the things that it has actually enabled you to do is do a re-recording of one of your most known works, Alpha and Omega, for the 30th anniversary. That was a couple of years ago, and honestly, that actually was a factor in why this book took 4 years to write, because that was a project that came off our discussions and was released first. You have done that work. You also shot some video with that from the concerts. We actually have a clip of one of those tracks, and perhaps you can introduce it. It is Kaddish.
So this is Kaddish for Bergen-Belsen, which opens Alpha and Omega. A Kaddish is a Hebrew word. It refers to a prayer that acknowledges the ultimate wisdom, authority of God, even in the face of great tragedy and great suffering. And Bergen-Belsen will be known to many of you as one of the former concentration camps. And very briefly, I was there in 1984, I think it was, unexpectedly, actually. And I spent time in Bergen-Belsen, and something forever changed for me during the hours that I spent there. I won't go into that. It's in the book. But out of that experience, I wrote the Kaddish. I wrote it as a piano piece, and then it was rearranged, of course, for full band and other musicians. It's an incredibly important start to the work because it brings people to a place actually of great darkness, great suffering, great sorrow. And those who know Alpha and Omega will understand that the journey you then embark on in that work brings you through every emotion you can imagine to extraordinary triumph and joy and hope at the end. But it has to come from somewhere. And I feel that the Kaddish rightly sets the scene for what's about to follow. Oh, and very quickly to say that when you watch this, you'll see a live sand artist, somebody who works with sand and a screen to depict the music and what its themes are. Extraordinary gift, this man, Gert van
der Vijver.
Yes, Gert van der Vijver, just an extraordinary gifted sound artist. So you'll see a little bit of him at work, just depicting some of the themes of the Kaddish behind the musicians.
Very powerful. Right. Kaddish for Bergen-Belsen on the 30th anniversary project for Alpha and Omega. This is actually one of the projects that you really delve into in the book, and obviously also the projects that came off of that, projects like Song of an Exile and that. They all have children at the forefront in those projects, and perhaps there is a link there with the lost child that you allude to in the title. That obviously a title is always hard to choose. You said music leads a lost child home. People will automatically assume the lost child was you, but perhaps you can expand a bit more on the thread that children are throughout the story in this book.
Again, looking back, I think I understand so much more now why I was so often drawn to the experience of children, how they viewed the adult world. To go quickly to the Holocaust and Bergen-Belsen, and then what came out of that for me musically, Song of an Exile. There was a lot of concentration in Song of an Exile of the poems written by children who'd experienced the Holocaust. Because for me, it's all very well to, as an adult, analyze what grown-ups were doing and what they were capable of doing to each other. And we witness it to this very day, what men and women are capable of doing to others in the name often of God. But it's another thing entirely to try and imagine that, experience that through the heart, the mind of a child who, presumably has grown up to understand that you trust adults. You respect them. You believe that they've got the answers, that they have wisdom. So what happens in the mind, in the heart, and the spirit of a child when they see utter evil, and that leads to great suffering and sometimes their own death? Now, that bothered me greatly. And that has been a kind of theme through a lot of my work, is to try and see the world or a particular issue through the eyes of a child, because I think it throws so much more important light on what is happening. What I realize in hindsight, and that is kind of a little bit what I think you're getting to, is that probably one of the reasons why I was so often drawn to that sense of the lost child is because just as a person, I think I grew up with a lot of confusion about who I was. I didn't feel comfortable around other children, for a start. I didn't feel that at ease with the world. I just was uncomfortable. I was often very anxious. I often couldn't make sense of what was going on around me. I saw things in a very black and white way. I couldn't understand why, if I had faith, why I couldn't move mountains and cause these things to happen. There's a lot in my upbringing, just because of the person Adrian was born to be, that meant that I felt quite lost. So this is not about parenting. It's not about how my parents were with me, or having some terrible experiences as a child. It's just the person I was, and like all of us, we are people we are. And I think it was the realization over the years, and particularly when we came to this book, that sense of actually, one of the reasons I'm so constantly drawn to the child's view of the world is because I'm still trying to reconcile that for myself. And there is that lostness in me too. But crucially, back to the title, a lostness that I find myself being brought home by music. So, music is finding me as well. I think that's what I'm saying. But that's really, I think, what lies behind, in part at least, this desire to see the world through the eyes of the child, and to find that child again. That don't many of us just long for that innocence? When I see my grandchildren at play and just being around their parents, there is that longing to be there again, to just see that spontaneity, that love of life, that improvisation about everything. I think most of us miss that as adults. I think part of me is trying to reconnect with that too.
Yeah. You mentioned a project like Song of an Exile, and the different projects that came out of that, the poems of the children that you discovered that gave words to the tragedy of the Holocaust, for instance. One of those songs that came out of that was If I Were, and you were able to perform that as part of a concert in the Valley of the Communities in Jerusalem. A very special place. We have a clip of that performance, and perhaps you can introduce that.
Yeah, it's not just in Jerusalem. It's at Yad Vashem, which is the Jewish memorial to the Holocaust. Just the most extraordinary place on earth. I can be given to overstatements, but I'm going to say this concert you're about to see a clip of was the most important, meaningful concert I have ever given, because of its location, the subject matter, the musicians that were around me, particularly the saxophone player who you'll see in this, Dave Fitzgerald, who's been such a hugely important part of my musical and my spiritual journey. And I've chosen this particular clip because, as well as you hearing me speaking, which will give you a sort of a context a little bit about what is being said over the audience, but out of the heart of Yad Vashem, but also Dave Fitzgerald's, the beginning of his solo, which I honestly don't think you will hear a more profound, emotional, emotive saxophone solo anywhere ever than what you're about to hear a bit of.
But Zion said, "The Lord has forsaken me. The Lord has forgotten me." Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me. Your sons hasten back, and those who laid you waste depart from you. Lift up your eyes and look around. All your sons gather and come to you. As surely as you live, you will wear them all as ornaments. You will put them on like a bride.
Still moves me to tears, almost. Really does. Thank you, Dave, if you're watching.
Yeah. Very impactful. It's from Song of an Exile. I think, but probably among your most known works, but probably the most known is one of your earliest works, The Passion. Now, there has been a lot about that written already. You go in depth in the book about how it came to be and what the lead up to it was. There is a question from Graham Wall who asks, looking back, do you feel that when you as an artist were writing songs about Jesus, could they have had a wider audience, especially The Passion?
Meaning because Jesus was in the subject matter, that it had a wider audience? I'm not quite sure what the meaning is, but okay, to answer that, first of all, hopefully if you remember something I said earlier about writing what had to be written. So The Passion was not written because somebody said, why did you write a passion? It was written because as a teenager, I was on my own journey, on my own search. And I remember very well when I first ever, as a teenager, I think around the age of 14, 15, read the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and was so overwhelmed by it that it became the song Gethsemane, which I wrote when I was, I think, 15. I was so overwhelmed by the thought that the Son of God, the Son of Man, was in the Garden of Gethsemane weeping. The Bible tells us that he was shedding blood through his sweat. So intense was that moment. And going to his disciples, finding them asleep, asking them to wake up and pray with him. All of that made such an impact on me as a child that I knew it had to be written. And I could go through most of the Passion and tell you the same kind of story. So to kind of answer that question, it had to be written. And I think what made the Passion so universal for people, my interpretation of it, because many artists have done their own interpretations, is the fact that a lot of it was written when I was very young. And I think there's a simplicity, a directness in the lyrics that somehow resonates with people. And musically, in the same way, in a sense, you've got, Gethsemane, the 15-year-old, through to things like Judas Song, which I wrote when I was at music college, quite a few years later. And I think musically, what you'll also get is that sense of a composer's journey. So the simple ideas, the things that kind of were already establishing my identity as a composer, the kind of chords I was using, the kind of melodies, the kind of rhythms. I think that may be what is what particularly helped The Passion on its way. Sort of in terms of the degree to which I've been able to keep performing that work for now 40 years. Is that right? Something like that.
Something like that. Now there was already Ed Newell alluded to it in his introduction, where he said perhaps you've reached a stage where you allow yourself to be more open and honest about what you want to say, and you feel that you have reached the stage where you want to say it. Have there been things in over the course of your career that you actually have now felt liberated or come to a point where you say this is the time to tell that story?
I think the answer to that is yes, but I would say with a proviso there that I'm not somebody that wants to hide things. I don't want people, when they listen to my material, to make assumptions about the person I am that are false. And that's why, even though a lot of my material might be sort of about projecting, like I said earlier, about imagining the world through the eyes of a child, or in the case of The Passion, trying to tell the story from the key players in what happened there. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that people will, when they listen to all the songs, particularly the solo albums, where I'm perhaps singing more about myself, will get the truth about me, about Adrian. I'm not trying to cover over the cracks or pretend that there aren't huge struggles too. But I think there is a sense in which now more than ever, having had the years that I've had as a music therapist, that sense of authenticity is right up there. It's the most important thing of all. When you are a music therapist or any sort of therapist, you are searching for the authentic in the person you're working with. Who are they really? And the beauty of music in this context, of course, is that if they have no words, and many of the children I work with either don't want to speak or will never speak in the language that we would relate to. But there is a way through music of getting to the authentic child and be able to work with that rather than with the words they might say. So I think that's what I'd say to that, is that where I do feel a more of a liberation to talk about all this stuff is because it is so important to me that authenticity is at the heart of everything I do, musically, lyrically, spiritually, emotionally, that it's authentic, it's true.
Yeah, there is obviously, you're talking about this and there are images that come to mind. I mean, I visited your work in Bath at the Three Ways, the school where you teach, and where you have the children of special needs that are guided to a more open communication through music, and it's a wondrous thing to behold. We actually have a clip that you made of a video called Fierce Love. It actually was the first to be titled as such. The title song of a project you did in 2013. But it's filled with images of your work as a music therapist these days, and it gives images to what you just described. So I suggest we take a look at that now.
Lovely.
This is where you reach me in the isolation. This is where you teach me, give me a foundation. This is where I hear you stumbling over speaking, searching for some meaning, never-ending words. This is where I know you, shuffling with the awkward, standing with the wayward, knowing we are heard. This is where I seek you, in the margins, not the center, celebrating difference in the dullness of the same. This is where I find you, seated at the table.
Your work as a music therapist, captured in song. There is actually, I feel we should mention that when we finish the stream in a couple of minutes, people will be able to hear a brand new song that is actually, I feel, linked to this subject matter. And I'll leave you to introduce it once we get there. To stick with the subject of music therapy, you go in depth in the book on what it has meant to you and how it takes shape. But there is a larger issue you want to raise from your experience as a music therapist, isn't there? The place of children in our society and the way we give them space. Can you elaborate on that?
I can try. It's a whole another stream, but okay. So we use the word inclusion an awful lot, and I'm not even sure it's an adequate word to mean how do we bring into an equal place in society people who may not obviously fit with what society determines is the norm. For me, a huge passion burden is to make the world, the communities that we live in, the churches that those of us who worship in, equal territory for people with special needs. And this, this is a profound issue because it does mean, to an extent, rethinking the way we shape the spaces that we share. So I can speak particularly as a Christian from the church point of view, because I've been to so many churches and I go to church. I know that the vast majority of churches, church buildings, are not made to accommodate people with special needs, physically, as well as often in terms of content. So, if we took the world of church, what we'd need to change and develop and rethink, if our churches were to become truly open and welcoming for the community of people with special needs, physical disabilities, as well as learning difficulties, mental health issues, there would be massive changes. And that could be mirrored perhaps in pretty well every other area of society. And I think it's incredibly important because, first of all, also as a person with faith, I believe God made us in his image, all of us, and that we're equal before him, and no one person is more valuable than another. But secondly, because of the scale we're talking about. I mean, I work at a school, you mentioned it, Three Ways in Bath, where we have about 230 children between the age of 4 and 19 with special needs. You could add at least another, between 5 and 10 people to every one of those children who is significantly directly involved in their life. So suddenly, one school with 225 children, you're talking about thousands of people who are feeling that sense of alienation from society, whether it be the church, whether it be shops, whether it be leisure centres. And that's one tiny school in one little city in England. Now imagine if you were to repeat that worldwide. So I just think this is an incredibly important issue. It's urgent. It means a lot of rethinking if we're prepared to do it. And yes, of course, it is a passion of mine because of my personal journey.
Yeah. So the rethinking, if people want to read all about what led you to that rethinking process, obviously it's Fierce Love, the book that you tell that story in. I suggest we have time for 2 quick questions before we wrap up. One of those comes from Francesca, who asks, as your voice has changed over the years, and she mentions, of course, for the better. How have you found this has affected your composing and performing?
That's a really good question. I hope very positively. I'll tell you one thing I do feel for sure is that I'm so much more liberated as a singer now than I was when I started. It's funny, even when I look back at some of my studio recordings, the early ones, I just hear so much held back. It's kind of, I feel that there was something, it might have been quite well sung, it was in tune and it carried quite a lot of emotion, but it didn't feel to me very free, if that's the right word. So I think, Francesca, that as life has gone on, and particularly in the last 20 years, let's say, since I started working or training as a music therapist to where I am now, I feel so much more freedom as a singer. I've lost the self-consciousness that often comes with singing out loud to people. And my goodness, you have to lose that when you're a music therapist and you're working with a class of children with special needs in front of, colleagues. Do not be self-conscious in that place, because you will not succeed with the children, at least. And I think, and again, I'm just briefly focusing on the new material, that I'm listening back even, today and yesterday to some of what I'm singing now on the new material. And I find myself just being really excited, because I find myself saying, actually, Adrian, you're singing that with a degree of freedom and depth that you definitely didn't have when you were in your 20s. And that really excites me. So let's hope everybody else agrees.
Yeah. Well, we'll hear a taste of that once the stream finishes with the new song. So yeah, that'll be that. I suggest we move on to the last question, which is on a lighter note. Graham asks, which do you consider your worst and which your best album? If of course you are inclined to think in such terms.
Well, I'm not, and not just to avoid the question, but because it kind of doesn't work like that. It's a bit like saying which is the worst photograph of you and which is the best photograph of you. It depends on the day, on the mood, on who is looking at it, what they see. So I am very proud professionally, actually, of the live version, the 30th anniversary edition of Alpha and Omega. I'm not putting that above all the other albums. I'm just saying that was the first album that I've released that is primarily a live recording with some studio additional work. And I think that with Dave Bainbridge as producer, with the contribution of others, that really is a milestone, because I think we were able to capture the essence of Alpha and Omega live. And it became, in my opinion, a stronger album than the one 30 years previously. So I think, right now I'd focus on that. I'd say Alpha and Omega for me, the 30th anniversary edition, I am very, very proud of. But I'm not going to go, well, okay, change of tack here. There is an album I'm not particularly proud of. It's called Midnight Awake. It was recorded in Nashville, and it was very much with the American market in mind. I don't dislike it, but to this day, when I listen to it, I do have to say, Adrian, is that really you? And I'll leave the question in the air. I think there's some nice songs on it and stuff, but it's not the album I would save. If anybody listening knows the program Desert Island Discs, where you have to save, a piece of music at the end. That's not the one I'd save. There you go.
There you go. Well, people can make up their own minds when they actually have the book, because I should mention that with each copy of the book, people get a code with which they can download a sampler of your music, which truly goes from early beginnings to current and the new. There are new songs on there as well. So that's available with those who get the book. And it is obviously available at your local Christian bookshop. Do support those in these difficult times where they actually have are struggling so much. Or you can order it from sacristypress.co.uk. And if you actually want a signed copy, I believe there are a few left on your website, Adrian, so people can look that up as well. I do want to thank you for taking the time here. And before I sign off, I want to thank one other person who I know you really would want to have in the limelight, which is your personal assistant, Natasha, who has done so much over the years for your to enable you to do what you do, and who has also gone to great lengths to make this all work so much better than it should. So
absolutely, and in so many ways has just made, has made the sort of resurgence, if I can put it that way, of me as a singer, songwriter, composer a joy, and just to have someone I can share so much of the the struggles with too. So Natasha, if you're watching, and I'm pretty sure you are, from the heart, thank you.
Yes. So with that, I actually want to leave people with a taste of your new music, a song called Love Your Hurt Away. If you've enjoyed this stream, this video, do hit the like button or subscribe to the Sacristy Press YouTube channel from wherever you are looking. Make sure you know that you were there, and we know that you were watching, and we do appreciate it.
And I think I'm right on my Leon that it will be available to watch again. I think it's been recorded. Am I right about that?
It should be, yes.
Good. So.
Yeah. So that'll be it from us signing off. And from a personal point of view, thank you, Adrian, for the years of which you were patient enough to open up and tell all these stories that are now in print and out for the world to read. It has been truly a privilege to be able to be that voice, to tell it, and to translate that into the language that you read.
Well, and thank you, Leon. As I started, it would not have happened without you. So thank you.
We are signing off. Do leave a note and a comment, and thank you again to the team of Sacristy.
Yeah, thank you,
we are signing off with a new song, Love Your Hurt Away. Thank you, Adrian. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
Hold me, believe in me, never let me go. Cover me, carry me, lead me safely home. Shelter me, be with me, love my hurt away. Bruises easily when I'm silent. Stay till I need struggles here. Darkened skies bring gloom. Drifting clouds, shadowlands, always raining doom and sorrow over me. Under me, drag me down, down, down. When I'm hidden, search for me, for I must be found. Pray with me, cry with me, tender take my hand. When I'm fearful, with me, just know me as I am. Lift your eyes, fix your gaze on red and golden skies. colors start to dance and glow. Watch and let surprise and wonder into you, blow through you, set your spirit free. Take one step, now take more, all the way to me. Together we will travel back, find you space to grieve for the child lost long ago, the child you long to heal. And so we'll journey to a place where life insists you come. Stand alone by the water's edge, and there gaze, searching down, down, down. And as the ripples still a while, and the crystal water comes, suddenly a child is there, and she waits with open arms. So teach her now to sing again, to taste, to live, to love, to listen new, to love herself, to jump and play and dance, aching now for nakedness. Cast your clothes aside and dive into the sea of promise, innocence and life. In this moment crystal clear, as the water meets your skin, the scars are simply washed away. Life will just begin.